Recognized nationally, Collins and Lacy offers both civil and criminal defense services for insurance carriers, captives, private businesses, and individuals. From Columbia, South Carolina, with legal news and information, this is The Legal Bench.
Welcome again to Collins and Lacy's podcast, The Legal Bench. And today we have a new segment that we're trying out, Meet the New Guy. And so we have invited to come speak with us in our studios today, Ty Zeigler, who is not necessarily a brand new guy, but he's been with us for about the 6 months. And we thought, well, if we were trying this out, why not start with Ty? So Ty, welcome to The Legal Bench.
Thanks for having me.
Well, as I told you, I said I wanted to cover a couple things just to have folks become a little bit more acquainted with you as you start your career at Collins and Lacy. Just a general question. Tell us a little bit about your background growing up, where you're from, and I know you went to Carolina undergrad. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Charleston. My parents still live there, so I'm glad this job actually allows me to go back here and there and go back to some of my favorite eateries when I visit clients down there. But I got to Columbia when I went to Carolina, so I've actually stayed. I just made it to Columbia, never made it back. So I consider Columbia home now, and I've gotten jobs here and started a career here, and so I've kind of built a life in Columbia.
That's awesome. So out of the galaxy of schools you were probably looking at for undergrad, what made you choose Carolina?
Well, my dad went to Carolina, so I was, I guess, a legacy, and grew up a Carolina sports fan, so that was attractive. But I think out of my high school, it was about half and half. The folks that went to college, well, maybe a third in each, but Carolina and Clemson. And briefly thought about going to Clemson, to be honest. I thought I wanted to be an architect at one point. Not sure why that idea got into my head, but it was something I was interested in when I was younger. Ended up feeling more at home in Columbia. I have family here and still do. And it was a little closer to Charleston still, so it wasn't too far away, but it was out of town, which was helpful for me, I thought. So.
Oh, that's awesome. You did what I did. When I was at Carolina, I studied political science. And so when you're studying political science, it seems like you're destined for probably one of three careers. You end up practicing law like we did, or you sell insurance, or you work in a bank. Did you know when you went to school and undergrad that you wanted to be a lawyer, or was that just something that ended up working out during the course of your undergrad career?
It ended up working out in due time. I was a page at the State House working on the House Judiciary Committee, and one of the staff attorneys there, I told them, I remember telling them, I was like, oh, I think I want to get like a master's in public administration, which I did end up doing. But he was just like, don't do that. You're just going to be a bureaucrat. And I was like, well, that sounds okay to me. But he said, no, you should go to law school. It's a great education, and it'll open up a lot of possibilities to you. And I didn't take it too seriously at first, but over time, I kind of bought into the idea, and law school looked increasingly more attractive. So I actually went to law school. I didn't think I would become a litigator. Ultimately, I thought I would still be in public service in some form, which I did do for a bit. I'm sure we'll talk about that. But yeah, that's kind of the genesis of it, was just kind of a stronger education to get into public service. That was beyond a master's in public administration.
Well, you and I it's a kind of a coincidence. We had kind of a similar track record. I didn't work in the General Assembly when I was an undergraduate, but I ended up working for an agency that's since gone away, but at the time was pretty important, the Budget and Control Board.
Right.
And I worked with census and health-related data, and the people I worked for, I was very influenced by. I had a lot of respect for them. And so I got a master's degree in health administration, an MPH.
There you go, yeah.
And so I thought the same thing. Like I was destined for public service. And it's just funny how things can twist and turn. My first job out of a graduate school, I had gone back to work full-time for the Budget and Control Board, and I was doing all this work as far as helping construct these contracts for data transfers between the agencies for some public health research. And the more time I spent doing that, just like the actual drafting of these contracts, is like, why don't I just go to law school and learn how to do this for real?
Absolutely.
And so I went ahead and applied. So you went to Carolina Law School too as well, right?
Yeah, I was like, if I want to be a lawyer in South Carolina, and if I want to stay in South Carolina, that's really the best place to go. Yeah. and frankly, possibly the only one I could get into. But
well, Carolina's a competitive school.
It is. It actually has gotten good. I felt like I was lucky to get in, but it's a good law school, and it's I felt like at home, and I had like I said, family in Columbia, so I actually had a free place to stay, which was helpful. It was helpful for me to afford law school as well, so that made things work for me a little bit.
So you finished at the old law school, right? Yeah. It must have been. When I was there, I graduated in 2000. It was on its last legs then. So I can't imagine being there another 10 or 13 years past that time.
No, and in undergrad, I was well aware they were trying to build a new law school and had plans for it. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll get in there. And no, that didn't happen. I do recall, I think it was my second or third year. At one point, they sent an email to the student body and I was like, what can we do to fix this place up for the few remaining years here, knowing they were going to build a new law school? They were trying to put lipstick on a pig, so to speak. But it was a little outdated. I'm a little jealous of it's a beautiful school now. The new building's wonderful.
You walk into that new building, which features the Collins and Lacy Courtyard, by the way. That place is a museum. It's a museum to the practice of law as far as the courtroom they've built, Judge Williams' courtroom in there. And then the library, that second floor reading room is, they've done all sorts of great things with the new law school.
Looks like something out of Oxford or something.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'd have to say too, they have the Chihuly in when you walk in, which I think is a great touch. And it's the second one. There's two in Columbia. So
where's the other one?
The Museum of Art.
I should know that.
Right.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about that. One of the things I know when you were coming to the firm and we were interviewing you, one of the things that are really, really important to us is just a relationship to the community. That's always been something that has been a kind of a cornerstone or foundation to what a great Collins and Lacy lawyer is. And one of the things that we recognized when we were interviewing you is how committed you are to the community, between the Museum of Art and I know as well Trustus Theater, and I want to talk a little bit about that. But even in your own where you live, you're involved as far as that goes. Talk a little bit about what you're up to, because you're one of the few lawyers that has a life outside of work. But talk a little bit about your community involvement.
I think it's interesting the way you phrase that, though. I think it's all interconnected, right? I think I think people look up to lawyers as in a way, people who are leaders naturally and who can serve the community through the skills they've learned in law school and in practice. So I don't know if I have a good answer for why I got involved in community things. I think they kind of just fall in my lap, but I've always naturally been somebody who volunteers, joins, becomes a part of things. Find that gives you a lot of purpose. When I worked at the court before I started here, one thing that's tough about that is, I appreciate public service for what it is academically, but when you work at a court, you're often seeing everything on paper, and it seems like it's a lifetime away from reality, and you don't get the same effect as you're doing something for the public good, but it's hard to see the impact. Whereas when you get involved in your community through boards and nonprofits and things like that, you see the work get done right in front of you, and you feel much more a part of it. And so I don't know. I think I've always just enjoyed that aspect of it, watching something get built and being a part of something that's being built. That's not for profit and not for for business. That's just more for something that's good for our city and good for ourselves.
As far as being a university town, you've got folks from all sorts of walks of life from all over the world that live in Columbia, and so we're secretly a pretty cosmopolitan place. And so between the Museum of Art, which is fantastic, and then we've mentioned the theater scene, we've got some really great things that I know. Charleston, when people from other places in the country, they think about South Carolina, they'll think about Charleston, and they'll think about Myrtle Beach and Hilton Head, and they'll think about Greenville a lot, but Columbia is a wonderful place to live, and like I said, it's got some pretty sophisticated aspects to it.
It has a very underrated art scene, and I've appreciated that since I was an undergrad when, I was still of the age and the place in my life where I wanted to go to house shows and things. And the music scene is fantastic here, and it always has been. part of that's a legacy from 5 Points, and we've had some big bands come out of here actually, but just the university culture and has really allowed for a thriving music scene, and that's how I started getting involved in that stuff. And as I got older, I started getting more involved in, like you said, the live stage theater and the museum of art, and I guess a little more, not underground, but above ground the art scene. But yeah, it is, and it's not something people talk about, I think, enough around here. And because I've always said this when I've pitched this to city leaders and things about investing in the arts, is that culture drives commerce. So you have to have the culture in a city and make the city lively and fun and interesting, and business will follow, and people's lives will follow, and homes will follow. But you've got to start with that culture, otherwise there's not a reason to be here, right? So.
Well, look at the embodiment of what you've just said. Look at Main Street.
That's right.
Over the last 5 or 10 years, and the Main Street folks, we've had them in, and they do a fantastic job. But there has to be a lot of support. But if you show people what's possible, like you said, commerce follows. And I can remember in the old days, I've lived here pretty much my entire life, being like 8, 9, 10 years old, and being downtown at 5 o'clock. They weren't literally, but they were figuratively rolling the sidewalks up at 5 o'clock.
Right.
And there wasn't anything going on down here. And of course, when they built the Marriott and when they built the museum and all the restaurants started to follow, and when you had the residential start to develop too as well, you come out to Main Street on a weekend night, it is teeming with people.
Absolutely.
And so you've got that, you have the Vista, you have 5 Points, you've got all other sorts of areas in town, now North Main Street. This is a good time to be living in Columbia.
I feel very lucky, even though I've worked downtown now for over 10 years, but being on Lady Street here is so nice to have access to Main Street and the Vista, and have it be walkable. That's actually a huge plus, I feel like, of working here is its access to culture and to restaurants and all that. There's a lot to do down here now.
It's fantastic. Let's talk a little bit about you as a professional. So you graduate from law school, you have kind of a series of jobs in the public sector, the Supreme Court, and went over in the district court. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I consider myself very lucky because being able to, my first job out of law school was at the Supreme Court as a staff attorney. It's a gig for young lawyers. It's a 2-year job usually. You work on a variety, obviously, of practice areas because it's just anything that gets to the Supreme Court. You work those cases up and then send them on to the justices for either granting cert and taking the case or denying it. And you get a 10,000-foot view of cases that is, I think, really helpful for young lawyers. Kelsey Bredovic here did the same thing as me starting out at the Supreme Court. And it really gives you such a good perspective on cases and how the law works from front to end. And so I feel very lucky that I was able to get that experience. Next, move on to the federal district court here in Columbia as well, and got to work for Judge Gossett for, I guess, almost 9 years. And so trial level court, got to see practice up close that way. Got to see federal court, which I think is very helpful for my career because I was able to, I would consider it the more orderly court. I think we'd all agree. And it's a little more complicated and complex. So I got to delve into that for a long time. And that gave me kind of a good bookend where I got to see things from the appellate perspective and then down to the trial level and do that for a long time. And of course, working directly with a judge who's experienced and smart and a great lawyer was also just a wonderful experience because I was able to, I feel like, learn from the best, honestly.
She's a fantastic person. When I was in law school, I clerked for the general counsel at DHEC, and she was an administrative law judge at that point. And then she found her way over to the federal district court as a magistrate. Just works really, really hard, has a really good affect with litigants, with lawyers. She does a great job.
Yeah, and I think she's, frankly, a great example right now of what we need a lot more of and that is someone with great judicial temperament.
Yes.
Even-keeled, thinks through things objectively, and, doesn't work on results, doesn't work on, trying to make certain ends meet. She looks at a case with objective eyes and through the lenses of what she's supposed to, and it's just even keeled and balanced about it, which I think is really wonderful. I wish more judges were, like that.
Well, I always tell people when they come to the firm who have had a clerkship experience. I had 2 years at the Court of Appeals with Ralph King Anderson, and I love working here, and I love being a member of this team. But the best job I ever had was clerking. Working day in, day out with a judge, and you talk about the things you're able to learn. I thought I understood evidence when I took the class in law school my second year. I thought I understood evidence when I took the bar exam, because you have to study it very hard. But I didn't realize until I was clerking, like when you see it in real everyday applications, that's where you learn evidence. That's where you learn procedure. That extra 2 years, I consider that kind of my fourth and fifth years of law school.
I think the other thing it gives you that I don't think we talk about that much is, frankly, just you are the neutral arbiter of the case, and you get to look at both sides. And you get to see what is good work and what is bad work from the bar, but you also get to see how to look at a case from both sides and consider two perspectives, and then work to a result that way. Whereas I know in our role now, and that's something I've tried to have to transition to here, is to say, well, no, this is what we want to say, and this is what we want to happen, and how do we get there? It's good to have that perspective and be able to see both sides, and I think often it's more than just two sides. I think it's more than that even. But yeah, looking at things in a three-dimensional way as opposed to just what your client wants and needs.
That is a really great observation. And for me, the older I get, the longer I get into practicing law, where I can tell who the really great judges are. You'll get into a discovery battle, or maybe there's an in limine motion at pretrial, and you'll be with opposing counsel, and they'll get very histrionic, very hyperbolic about things, and maybe your client did do something not perfectly or what have you, and the judge that sits there listens, dispassionately to that argument, doesn't get fired up, doesn't get sucked into that argument, and they'll say, all right, well, Mr. Stegmaier, what do you have to say? And because there are always two sides to every story.
There really is.
And the really great judges understand that. So they never get fired up they don't get sucked into those arguments.
Right.
And, that's when you, especially in federal district court, working with people like Judge Anderson, all the folks over there, they're there for a reason. To be a federal district judge, you've got to be the real deal. And that's a great education.
They also have very good staff. I've found the law clerks there are really top notch. A lot of them are not right out of law school. I mean, there are younger ones, but then most federal judges have a experienced career staff member, a lawyer on their staff who often knows just as much as any practicing lawyer out there. And so to get to interact with those folks and work on cases with them was really special.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Collins and Lacy. You had a really great career over at the district court. That's probably something you could have made a career out of, as you go from here to retirement. And there's a little bit of a siren song to doing that, but you decide to jump out and get into private practice. And of course, every law firm up and down the street is hiring really great lawyers, especially really great lawyers with really great experience. So you have the pick of the litter as far as that goes. What brought you to Collins and Lacy?
The firm has a great reputation. So that's the one, it's not a fly-by-night operation. This is a firm that's been here a long time.
We try. So.
Has deep roots in the community. The folks I knew that were here, Kelsey, Mike, the crowd of and talent, the attorneys, good people, so I could tell at the time Collins and Lacy hired good people and character mattered, which is important to me. I came down and sat for an interview and talked to Claude Prevost and Kelsey, and they convinced me. They had great things to say about it, and I found them to be very trustworthy and friendly, and I just found the environment to be really appealing. Yeah.
So coming over now, you do primarily, I guess, one or two things on a day in, day out basis. You're working. You've got yourself into construction defect related work.
Yes.
And then you're doing some regular general liability work, a lot of premises, a lot of the typical kind of personal injury defense, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So obviously, clerking, working inside the court system, you understand the disputes. Of course, you've never had to keep time. You never had to deal with clients. You never had to create the reporting or anything like that. The basic blocking and tackling a defense-based practice. I'll notice this. You're one of the hardest working people here. You came right out of the gate that way. How did you decide for yourself? This is how I'm going to make my transition into private practice?
Well, I don't know if I have a good answer for you for that, Christian.
Yeah.
I mean, I do know one thing. I decided when I knew coming out to private practice that it'd be a different lifestyle, it'd be a different type of work, and I knew it'd be hard. I had no illusions that I would just be able to walk into the office, and because I've read a lot of cases and done a lot of writing, that I would all of a sudden be able to do this work, which is quite different. I decided I was still young enough to make the transition. I think the older you get, the harder it is to do something new. So still feel like I have enough youth and energy, so to speak, to tackle it. But, I just decided I wasn't going to come in here and part of my friends do a half-assed job. I wanted to, actually put my head down and get into it and be good at it, because one of the reasons I wanted to come out into private practice was just to see if I could do it, frankly. I mean, it sounds a little trite, I guess, but I've been watching other people practice, and I've said, I'd like to try my hand at that, and I want to see if I can do it. And I've known this for a long time, that lawyers, especially in a state like South Carolina and a city like Columbia, where your reputation precedes you, and there's no hiding from it. Everyone can see you, and everyone knows everybody just about. So I wasn't going to have a bad reputation as a lawyer. So I wanted to make sure I was doing things the right way, with a firm that's established and does good work. And I want to be known as a lawyer that does good work, because I know that reputation is going to follow me wherever I go from here on out. So I wanted to make sure I was doing things the right way.
Joel Collins says the best lawyer in Columbia is the most prepared lawyer. And I think about it. He told me that probably the first week I worked here 25 years ago, and that has continued to resonate with me. One thing that you and I talked about, kind of wrapping up, is that we share with the folks that come that I want to help you, or the partnership wants to help you create a kind of a distinction or competitive advantage for yourself, maybe a niche. And we've talked at length about that. You and I have had a conversation about the fact that you're probably in the galaxy of people at the firm, and probably in Columbia, one of the folks that probably are in best in tune with 1983 related litigation. That's something that interests you, something that obviously you dealt with on the federal district court side when you were there. Talk a little bit about your aspiration to get into 1983 litigation, and what would make you kind of a unique player in Columbia as far as that goes.
Yeah, well, I mean, just one of my experience doing this, and in South Carolina, at least, the federal magistrate judges, one of which I work for, they work heavily in that area. They take on most 1983 cases are sent to magistrate judges when they're filed. I love that type of work. That is, it's torts, it's personal injury, but there's a constitutional dimension. So you have every aspect of the law, from your basic premises liability situations and negligence, kind of the basic, like you talk about blocking and tackling of the law, but then you get into the much heavier, much deeper, more complex issues of constitutional law, and then just the practical issues of how does government interact with its people, and how can they be compensated, and I think that's fascinating stuff. It's certainly, in terms of cases that are newsworthy and interesting to people, I think 1983 stuff's right up there with anything, because that is everything from police shootings to First Amendment issues and on. So I just enjoy kind of the importance of it and that type of work. Also it's heavily federal practice. It's both federal and state court, but I do love federal courts. I do want to practice there, and that would allow me the opportunity to do that a little more than we do here, when we remove some cases, in our kind of insurance defense practice, but probably primarily in state courts for a lot of the work we do. So.
Well, I'm excited, and like I told you, I'm ready to get the word out about this special lawyer that we have in the firm that has this type of capability just from jump. That's a rarity, and so we're excited about being able to promote to all our clients, to all our friends that we work with, this new capability that we have.
Oh, thank you for the kind words. Yeah.
Well, Ty Zeigler, new guy. Welcome to Collins and Lacy.
Happy to be the new guy. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Well, that's it for this episode of The Legal Bench. Join us the next time as we delve into something else that's interesting as it relates to law in South Carolina. Thanks so much.
You've been listening to The Legal Bench from the attorneys at Collins and Lacy. For more information about the nationally recognized law firm, visit collinsandlacy.com.